Hey guys, welcome back. So this is our second lesson for this week. We are looking at 8.2 today. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, so for the first part, we want to fill in the number that completes the square and then write the factored form. So remember, we've done this before. We had a whole section over completing the square and writing the factored form. You guys have even actually been tested on it. So what we do is we take that middle number. It's always going to be the middle number. We're going to take the 6, divide it by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Then we take that number and square it. 3 squared is 9. So the number to complete the square is 9. And then the factored form is just x plus 3 squared. So whatever number you get after dividing by 2, that's what's going to go in the parentheses. Whatever the sign is on your middle number, that's what the sign is going to be inside the parentheses. Okay? Alright, so technically this is the next section, but it's the same thing. It's just these ones, when we divide by 2, it's not going to work out so nicely. So that's why it's in a separate section. So all of the ones for 1 through 4 are going to work out perfect when you take and divide. 5 through 10 don't work out quite as nicely. So if we take negative 11 and divide it by 2, we get negative 11 over 2 because we're going to leave it as a fraction. So that's the thing with these. I don't want to see decimals. It specifically says in the directions, leave the number that completes the square as a fraction. So if you write a decimal, I'm going to mark you wrong because it specifically says leave it as a fraction. So make sure you do that. So we're going to take that 11 halves and now we're going to square it. So squaring a fraction, that means we're going to square the numerator. So 11 times 11 is 121 over, we square the denominator. 2 times 2 is 4. So our number that completes the square is 121 over 4. And I want to see it wrote just like that. It's going to be a fraction. Do not write a decimal under any circumstances. Now, for our factored form, we're going to have x minus 11 over 2 squared. So remember, whatever this number is, that's what's going over here. This was a subtraction, that's why we have that negative or a subtraction sign there. Oh, excuse me, choking. Okay, number 10. We have x squared minus 3/4 x plus something. So in this case, we already have a fraction for our middle number. We still have to divide. So we're going to take the negative 3/4 and we're going to divide it by 2. Now, remember, same times flip. So we keep the first fraction the same, and then we multiply by the reciprocal. So this is really 2 over 1. So now it's going to be 1 over 2. So 3 times 1 is still the 3. 4 times 2 is 8. Now, we square this. Sorry, I should have some equal signs in there. So 3 squared is 9. 8 squared is 64. And then our factored form, x minus 3/8 squared. So that is how we do these for the first 4. It'll be nice and easy. You'll have whole numbers just like we did on number 1. For 5 through 10, you're going to have fractions, and I expect to see fractions, not decimals. And make sure you have both parts. Don't find just the number that completes the square. You also have to have the factored form. That's 2 points, so it's going to be 2 points for every single one of these problems. So make sure you have both parts because it counts. All right, our next section, looking back at circles. But remember how I said we were going to get into circles that didn't have a center at the origin? Guess what? We're there. So here is our circle on number 12. The center of this circle, sorry, I forgot, got a little erased somehow. So the center of our circle is at this point right here. So what is the ordered pair for this point? X value is -1, y value is -2. So our center is the point -1, -2. Now, the equation for a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So in the cases that we looked at last time where the origin was just 0, 0, it makes sense if we plug 0 in for h and k, why we would just have x squared and y squared. But now we have actual coordinates to plug in there. So our center is hk. So h is what our x value is, k is what our y value is. So we plug that in. So we're going to have x minus -1 squared plus y minus -2 squared equals, now, what is our radius? If we look to go from the center to the edge, we're going from -1 to 0. So what's the radius? It's 1. So 1 squared. Now, we simplify this down as much as we can. So we have x plus 1 squared, because remember, minus a negative. We don't want to have minus a negative. We want the plus 1, plus y plus 2 squared equals 1. There is the equation of our line, not of our line, of our circle that is centered somewhere other than 0, 0. So somewhere other than the origin. So for each of these, let's see, I think it's 11, 12, and 13. Yep, so 11, 12, and 13 are all like this. Figure out the coordinates of your center first. The center is marked with the point A, so it's labeled. I didn't have mine labeled on here, but it is labeled and marked. Just figure out what the ordered pair is for that point. And then using this formula right here, substitute in your x value of your center for the h, the y value of the center for the k, and then figure out what your radius is. So the radius will always be from the center to one of the edges, and it doesn't matter which edge you choose. So whichever one you're most comfortable with finding it for. Okay? Now, this is when you have a graph, what it looks like, but guess what? They did a second section where you don't have a graph to look at. It tells you what the center is, and it tells you what the radius is. So, all of these will tell you the radius and the center, so you don't have to worry about trying to solve for anything there. So, using that same formula, and we're doing 2 of these, yes. So, center is 5, 2, radius is 13. So we're going to have x minus 5 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals, what's 13 squared? 169. There's your answer. All right, 16. Center is 0, 8. Because we have 0 for a coordinate, you can write it out, and I'm fine with you writing x minus 0 squared plus y minus 8 squared equals, what's 15 squared? 225. Now, you can write it just like this, or you could write it as x squared plus y minus 8 squared equals 225. Either of those two is perfectly acceptable when we're writing a circle. Because one of the coordinates is 0, we don't have to have x minus 0 squared. X minus 0 squared is just x squared. So you can take and simplify it to that, or to have practice with making sure you plug in the coordinates of the center correctly, you can take and keep it as x minus 0 squared. Either is perfectly acceptable. All right, the last section. You are going to identify which point is a solution to the given equation. So you're given an equation, and then you're given 2 points. And you have to decide which one is a solution. So what that means is we're going to plug in the values of x and y into the equation and see if it gives us a true statement. If it does it, we test the other point and see if it works. So on this first one, we have y equals 4/5 x minus 2. Sorry, the glare is really bad. And then we have the point -15, -14. We also have the point 10, 10. So if we plug in the point -15, -14, oops, x goes, so negative 15 is our x, so we're going to have negative 14 equals 4/5 times negative 15 minus 2. Now, this 5 and this 15 can cancel out, so this 5 goes away entirely. The 15 becomes a negative 3. So 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. So we have negative 12 minus 2. Negative 12 minus 2 is negative 14. So, did that work out to be a true statement? Yes, it did. So that means A, the point negative 15, negative 14 is the correct answer. So if you manage to figure out the correct point, you don't have to take and do the other one. So if you always start with A and it's A, that means you don't have to do the work for B. If by looking at it you can get a good idea of what the answer should be, then you can skip having to do the work for A and do the work for B. But you have to show your work for the correct point. So show your work. All right. For 21, we have y equals 3 times the absolute value of x. We've got the point negative 4, negative 12, and we've got the point negative root 5 and 3 root 5. So we're going to start with A. So we have negative 12 equals 3, absolute value, negative 4. The absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4, so we have 3 times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. Does 12 equal negative 12? Nope, so it's not A. Now, we have to show that it does work out for B. So, same thing, 3 root 5 equals 3 times the absolute value of negative root 5. Absolute value of negative root 5 is going to give us a positive root 5. And 3 times root 5 gives us 3 root 5. So did this one work out? Yes, it did, which means B is the correct answer for this one. So you just have to take and plug in x and y into the equation and see if it works out. If it does, you'll get a true statement just like this. If it doesn't, you'll have something like this. So whether they're just opposites or whether they're two totally different answers, that's what you're looking at for a no, meaning it's not a solution. All right, so your keyword for this lesson is center. Since all of our circles had a center other than 0, 0, or the origin, it makes writing our equations a step more complicated. So center is your key word for this lesson. Have a wonderful week and happy mathing.